After my best friend ignored her son's cry for help, I took him in. She threatened to sue me for parental alienation. This week, she lost more than just the case, she lost him forever. Hi, my name is Lena Hart. I'm 34, and 3 months ago it started the way most disasters in life do, small, almost invisible. A few ignored calls. A rushed birthday party where Jessie, my best friend since freshman year of college, barely glanced at her son, Eli, between sipping mimosas and checking her phone. I remember thinking, she's busy, she's stressed, who isn't? I excused it. I always excused it. Jessie had been the golden one between us. The one with the big hair, the bigger laugh, the easy charisma that made people lean in without even realizing it. She'd married fast, divorced faster, and somewhere along the way had Eli, who is now 13, all knobby knees and shaggy hair, with these serious, heavy eyes that didn't match his age. I loved that kid. Always had. I was Aunt Lena, the safe adult in his chaotic world. The day everything shifted, it was raining, that cold, mean kind of rain that drills straight into your skin. I was leaving work late, juggling my umbrella, my laptop, and a plastic container of leftover pad thai when I saw I had 3 missed calls from an unknown number. Then a text. Eli, can I come over? Please. No emojis. No explanation. I didn't hesitate. I texted back, of course, and 15 minutes later, he was at my door, soaked to the bone, a backpack hanging off one shoulder. He smelled like damp clothes in fear. Where's your mom? I asked, helping him peel off his jacket. My hallway smelled like rain and old wood, the way it always did after a storm. He shrugged. A shrug that said, don't ask. Something in my chest twisted. Did you eat? Another shrug. I microwaved the pad thai, handed him a plate, and watched him eat like he hadn't in days. Afterward, he crashed on my couch without a word, curled up into himself like he was trying to disappear. I let him. I figured I'd talk to Jessie in the morning. Figure it out. Smooth it over like I always did. Only when I called her the next day, she didn't answer. Not on the first try. Not the second. Not even when I left a voicemail, hey, Jess, Eli's with me, just checking in, call me back. Nothing. At noon, I tried again. Then at 3 p.m. After work, I drove past her house. Lights off. No car in the driveway. I should have panicked then. But I didn't. I just kept telling myself, she's busy. She'll call. Eli stayed quiet through it all. He followed me around the house like a ghost. Helped me set the table for dinner. Sat next to me on the couch while I half-watched some cooking show. Didn't say a word about school, or his mom, or why he had nowhere else to go. On the third day, when Jessie still hadn't called, Eli finally cracked. I was folding laundry in the living room, chatting about nothing, filling the silence when he said, so quietly I almost missed it. She's not coming back. I stopped mid-fold. What do you mean? He picked at a loose thread on the blanket he was sitting under. His voice was flat, practiced. She left last week. Said she had a job thing. Left me a pizza and $50. I stared at him, the clean towel in my hand slipping to the floor. Eli, you've been alone for a week? He nodded like it was no big deal. Like this was normal. Something inside me shattered. That night, after Eli fell asleep on the couch, I poured myself a glass of wine, sat at the kitchen table, and made a list. What I knew. What I needed to do. Who I needed to call. I thought about calling Child Protective Services. Thought about the questions they would ask. The way they would pull him into some broken system, shuffle him around like paperwork. I thought about Jessie, the girl who once bailed me out of jail after a stupid college prank went wrong. The girl who held my hand when my mom died. But mostly I thought about Eli, asleep in my living room, trusting me without saying a word. I didn't call CPS that night. Instead, I called my lawyer cousin Rachel. Off the record, I said, what happens if a kid just stays with you? There was a long pause. Lena, she said finally, if the parent doesn't come back, you might be looking at guardianship proceedings. Maybe even foster certification if it gets formal. And if the parent shows up later? I asked. Rachel sighed. Could get messy. Real messy. I hung up with a pit in my stomach. By the end of the week, Jessie still hadn't called. By then, I had bought Eli some new clothes, jeans and hoodies he picked out, carefully, like he was afraid to ask for too much. I took him to the dentist when he said his tooth hurt. I went to his parent-teacher conference where I learned he hadn't turned in homework for weeks. Slowly, day by day, I realized something brutal. Jessie hadn't lost track of her son. She had left him. And no one noticed. No teachers. No neighbors. Not even her own parents, who lived 3 towns over and barely called on holidays. It was just me. And Eli. I wish I could say I handled it gracefully, but the truth is I panicked in slow motion. I worked during the day, juggled court paperwork at night, Googled temporary guardianship at 2 a.m. until my eyes burned. And somewhere in there I started to love him like he was mine. Not just the casual, Aunt Lena kind of love, the real, blood-deep, I would burn the world down for you kind. Maybe that's why when Jessie finally showed up 2 weeks later, I didn't open the door. She pounded on it, yelling my name. Eli froze, the TV remote slipping from his hand. It's okay, I said, pulling him close. But inside, I was shaking. Jessie's voice cracked through the door. I'm calling the cops, Lena. You can't keep him. You're alienating my son from me. I hugged Eli tighter. He didn't move. Didn't even look toward the door. He just whispered, so small I almost didn't hear it. Please don't let her take me. And just like that, in that one breathless, broken moment, I knew there was no going back. Not ever. I didn't answer the door that night. I sat there, one hand on Eli's back, feeling the way he was shaking under his sweatshirt. The pounding finally stopped after maybe 15 minutes, but even after the silence fell, neither of us moved. I half expected Jessie to kick it down, or for the police to show up with flashing lights and cold questions. But nothing happened. Just quiet. Eventually, Eli fell asleep against me, and I carried him to the spare room, the one that used to be my office before it became his. I sat on the edge of his bed for a long time afterward, just watching him breathe, wondering how the hell we got here. The next morning, I called Rachel again. Okay, I said, I need real advice now. What happens if she sues me? There was no pause this time. You need to file for emergency guardianship, she said bluntly. Today. She walked me through it, the forms, the affidavits, the evidence I'd need. It'll buy you time, she added. If she's serious about a custody fight, it'll get ugly fast. Especially if she throws around words like parental alienation. Is that even a real thing? I asked, pressing the phone between my ear and shoulder as I dug through my filing cabinet for Eli's school records. It's real. But it's complicated. Courts don't like it when parents abandon their kids and then claim someone stole them. That gave me a little hope. Not much. But a flicker. By noon, I was standing in front of a weary clerk at the county courthouse, sliding papers across the counter with sweaty palms. Emergency guardianship. Best interest of the child. Documented abandonment. I'd never seen my own handwriting shake before. The clerk stamped everything mechanically, didn't even look up when she said, "You'll hear from the judge within 72 hours. 72 hours. 3 days. A lifetime. That night, Jessie showed up again. This time she brought backup. A man, her latest boyfriend, I guessed, stood with her on my porch, arms crossed, looking like he thought he could intimidate me into compliance. They banged on the door again. Yelled threats. Called me a kidnapper. Eli didn't move from where he was curled up under a blanket on the couch, his face hidden. I closed the curtains. Turned off the porch light. Sat on the floor behind the couch, heart hammering, and just waited it out. The next morning, I found a crumpled piece of paper shoved under my door. You have 24 hours to return my son or I call the police. Jessie. No signature. No apology. Just that. I snapped a picture of it and texted it to Rachel. Me, can she do anything with this? Rachel, no. It actually makes her look worse. Me, what if she calls CPS? Rachel, good. Let her. You have records. You've been documenting, right? I had. Every call, every text, every grocery receipt, every dentist bill. And now the court forms too. Still, I couldn't stop checking the street outside. Waiting for a cop car to pull up. Waiting for everything to explode. The court hearing was set for Thursday morning. I barely slept the night before, my mind spinning worst-case scenarios. What if the judge thought I was meddling? What if they gave Eli back to her out of some biological parent bias? What if they didn't believe a woman like Jessie, all charm and tears when she wanted to be, could do something so heartless? Eli sat next to me in the waiting room, his backpack clutched in his lap like a life jacket. He was so quiet. So small. When they called my name, I stood up, knees trembling. The courtroom was almost empty. Just the sleepy judge in black robes, a clerk, and us. Jessie wasn't even there. Rachel had warned me, don't be surprised if she doesn't show up. People like her think they don't need to. It turned out to be the best thing that could have happened. The judge flipped through my papers, frowning thoughtfully. You're alleging abandonment? Yes, Your Honor, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. He's been living with me for almost 3 weeks. No contact, no support, nothing. And the mother was aware? I handed over the crumpled note. The judge raised an eyebrow. Charming. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing hysterically. After 20 minutes of reviewing everything, the absence, the school reports, the doctor's appointment receipts, the judge leaned back in his chair and said, I'm granting temporary guardianship. Review hearing in 90 days. File notice with the mother immediately. I barely heard the rest. Temporary guardianship. It wasn't forever. But it was something. I squeezed Eli's hand so tightly I thought I might crush it. He didn't flinch. He just looked up at me, and for the first time in weeks I saw a flicker of hope. I thought maybe, just maybe, Jessie would realize she lost and disappear. I should have known better. The court papers were barely dry when she started her next campaign. Social media posts about how someone she trusted had kidnapped her son. Long, tear-streaked videos where she talked about parental alienation and being punished for working hard to provide. Eli didn't have social media, thank God, but I did. And it didn't take long before mutual friends started messaging me. WTF is going on? Did you really take her kid? Jesse says you brainwashed him? Brainwashed. Because apparently feeding him dinner and tucking him in at night was now psychological warfare. Rachel advised me not to respond publicly. Let her bury herself, she said. The more she posts, the worse she looks. But it didn't stop the guilt from creeping in. Did I do the right thing? Was I really stealing him? Late one night, unable to sleep, I found myself sitting on the floor by Eli's door, listening to him breathe. He stirred a little and mumbled something I couldn't hear. I almost went in. Almost woke him up to ask, "Are you okay? Do you want to go back?" But I didn't. Because deep down I knew. He didn't. The final straw came the next weekend. Jessie showed up outside Eli's school. She wasn't allowed to under the guardianship order. She had no custody rights until the next hearing. But there she was, waiting by the fence when the last bell rang. I was parked across the street. I saw her first. Eli saw her a second later and froze. He didn't run to her. He didn't even wave. He just turned back toward the school building, his little shoulders stiff as wire. Jessie called out to him, her voice syrupy sweet. "Eli. Baby? Come here." He looked at me across the road. And then he did the bravest thing I'd ever seen. He shook his head. And he walked away. When Eli turned his back on Jessie and walked away from the school fence, something inside me shifted, like watching a door slam shut behind us, one that would never open again. I drove him home in silence, one hand white-knuckled on the wheel. I didn't know whether to cry or scream or just pull over and hug him until the sun came up. Instead, I asked carefully, "Are you okay?" Eli shrugged, but there was a steeliness to it now. A quiet finality. "I don't want to see her," he said, voice flat. I nodded, swallowing a lump the size of a brick. "You don't have to. Not unless you want to." He didn't answer. He didn't have to. That night, Jessie left me a voicemail. I listened to it once. Then again. Each time, my stomach twisted tighter. She sounded furious. Shaky. But also, weirdly rehearsed, like she was ticking off a checklist a lawyer gave her. "You're brainwashing my son. You're poisoning him against me. I am filing for immediate custody. You'll be hearing from my lawyer." I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the blinking voicemail notification, feeling something cold settle in my chest. It was happening. The war she promised. I called Rachel immediately. "She's filing," I said. "What do I do?" Rachel didn't even sound surprised. "Good. Now we force the issue. She wants a fight? She'll have to do it in court, where her behavior will be on record. Do you think?" I hesitated. Could she actually win? Rachel was quiet for a moment too long. "Lena, you have a strong case. Abandonment. Neglect. You've documented everything. But courts lean heavily toward biological parents, especially if they put on a good show." I pressed a hand to my forehead. "She'll lie," I whispered. "Then we'll tell the truth louder," Rachel said firmly. "Do not back down." I didn't know if I was brave enough. But I knew Eli deserved someone who would at least try. 2 weeks later, the paperwork arrived. A thick envelope hand-delivered by a process server who looked vaguely apologetic. Inside, petition for custody. Accusations of parental alienation. Claims that I coerced Eli into rejecting his mother. Demands for immediate reunification and compensatory visitation. I stared at the pages, feeling like I'd just been hit by a train. Jessie's affidavit was unbelievable. Page after page of wild exaggerations, half-truths, and flat-out lies. She claimed she left Eli for a short business trip, not weeks of abandonment. She said she tried to call him every day. My phone records said otherwise. She painted herself as a hardworking, devoted single mother, and me as a bitter, jealous woman who stole her child out of spite. I should have laughed. Instead, I wanted to throw up. Rachel and I spent the next month building our case. It was brutal. Hours of gathering text messages, emails, voicemails. Sworn statements from Eli's teachers, neighbors, even the school nurse, all confirming they hadn't seen Jessie in months. We hired a guardian ad litem, a court-appointed investigator to interview Eli and make a recommendation to the judge. I was terrified. Because no matter how much paperwork I had, none of it mattered if Eli didn't feel safe enough to tell the truth. The day the guardian came to my house, Eli sat stiffly on the couch, twisting his hoodie strings into knots. The woman, Ms. Branson, was kind. Patient. She spoke to him like he was a person, not a case file. I sat in the kitchen, pretending to scroll my phone, listening with one ear. "Can you tell me a little about where you were living before?" she asked. Eli hesitated. Then in a small voice, sometimes Mom was gone a long time. How long? Days. Sometimes a week. And who took care of you when she was gone? No one, he whispered. There was a long pause. How do you feel living with Lena? Eli didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice cracked a little. Safe. I pressed my hands against my mouth so I wouldn't sob out loud. A week before the court date, Jessie tried one last move. She texted me. First time she'd reached out directly since the night she screamed on my porch. Jessie, let's just meet. Talk. We don't have to make this ugly. I stared at the screen, feeling a strange hollowness. The woman who abandoned her son now wanted to make nice not because she cared, but because she was scared she might lose. I didn't answer. A few hours later, another text. Jessie, you're not even a mother. You wouldn't understand. Blood matters. I sat on my bed, phone glowing in my hand, and thought about all the times I'd rocked Eli when he had nightmares. All the meals I'd cooked when he forgot to eat. All the dentist visits, the school conferences, the nights spent worrying about a kid who wasn't even mine, but who had somehow become my whole heart. Blood matters. Maybe it did. But love matters more. The day of the hearing was gray and rainy again, just like the day Eli showed up on my doorstep. It felt like the universe was coming full circle. Rachel met me at the courthouse steps, umbrella in hand, her mouth a tight, determined line. You ready? She asked. No. Yes. I didn't know. But I nodded anyway. Inside, Jessie was already there. She looked good, too good. Sleek hair. Designer coat. Makeup done with the precision of a woman who knew appearances mattered. She smiled at me. A cold, sharp thing. I didn't smile back. Eli clutched my hand all the way through the metal detectors, through the check-in line, into the wood-paneled courtroom where everything smelled like old paper and nerves. When the judge entered, everyone rose. And just like that it began. Jessie's lawyer went first. He painted a pretty picture. Single mom. Temporary hardship. A friend who overstepped boundaries and alienated a confused child. He spoke smoothly, emotionally, pressing all the right buttons. By the time he finished, Jessie was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. I felt my stomach sink. It was a good show. Then Rachel stood up. And slowly, methodically, she dismantled it all. Exhibit after exhibit. The absence. The abandoned house. The school reports. The doctor's visits. The voicemail threats. Every lie Jessie had spun, we unraveled, patient, deliberate, unstoppable. And then finally they called Eli to testify. He walked to the witness stand so small, so brave, it made my chest ache. He sat down. Swore the oath. Clutched the armrests like they were the only things keeping him upright. Rachel approached him gently. Eli, she said, voice soft. Can you tell the court how you came to live with Lena? Eli swallowed. His voice shook. She took me in when I didn't have anywhere else to go. And how did you feel when your mom left? He hesitated. Then quietly. Scared. Rachel nodded like she'd expected it. Has Lena ever told you bad things about your mom? No, he said firmly. Has Lena ever tried to stop you from seeing her? No. And do you want to go back to live with your mom? There it was. The question that could undo everything. The whole room held its breath. Eli blinked. His eyes found mine. Held. Then he shook his head. No, he whispered. I want to stay with Lena. For a moment after Eli said it, I want to stay with Lena. The courtroom stayed completely silent, like the entire building itself was holding its breath. Jessie's lawyer shifted awkwardly. Jessie froze, her tissue crumpled tight in her fist. Even the judge paused, peering over his glasses at the boy in front of him, like he needed to be sure he'd heard right. I see, the judge said slowly. He made a note on the paper in front of him, his face carefully blank. Rachel gave a tiny nod like she was saying good job kid without speaking. And then it was over. Eli was excused. He hurried back to my side like he couldn't get off the witness stand fast enough. I wrapped an arm around his shoulder without thinking. Felt him trembling just slightly under his hoodie. The judge straightened his papers, looked out at the courtroom and cleared his throat. Given the totality of the evidence, he said, voice even and measured, and most importantly, the child's own expressed wishes, the court finds that a change in guardianship is in the best interest of the minor. I didn't breathe. In light of the abandonment, the failure to maintain parental contact, and the documented pattern of instability, temporary guardianship is hereby extended for a period of 1 year, subject to review. I squeezed Eli closer. Jessie made a small choking sound from across the aisle. The judge's voice sharpened. Furthermore, until the mother can demonstrate a sustained ability to provide a stable environment, any visitation must be supervised and initiated through the Department of Child and Family Services. Jessie snapped her head up at that, eyes wide and wild. No, she blurted. Everyone turned toward her. No, you can't. He's my son. You can't keep him from me. The judge didn't even blink. That is my ruling. You may appeal if you wish. Jessie stood there, hands shaking, her mouth opening and closing, but no words coming out anymore. And just like that, the gavel came down. Bang. Case closed. We walked out of the courthouse into the thin drizzle, Eli's hand still locked in mine. I didn't even feel the rain. Didn't feel anything except this dizzy bone-deep exhaustion that made my legs feel like water. Rachel caught up with us on the steps, her umbrella tilting sideways against the wind. You did good, she said simply. I tried to find words, but I couldn't. Eli looked up at me. His lips curved into the smallest, shyest smile. And I realized, maybe for the first time since this whole thing started, that we were going to be okay. Jessie wasn't finished though. The next day the emails started. Long rambling essays accusing me of ruining her life. Threats to expose me. Accusations that I had turned everyone against her. Poisoned Eli's mind. Destroyed her chance at redemption. She even posted another video online, wailing into the camera about injustice, about losing her son to a jealous outsider. It might have been funny if it hadn't been so sad. For a long time I sat on my living room couch reading and rereading the things she wrote, trying to feel anger. But all I felt was pity. She wasn't fighting for Eli. She was fighting for her own pride. For the story she wanted to tell about herself. That she was the hero misunderstood, wronged by a cruel world. But Eli wasn't a prop. He wasn't a trophy. He was a person. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't invisible anymore. We settled into a new rhythm. Eli and me. Breakfast together in the morning, cereal or eggs, depending on whether I remembered to grocery shop. Homework at the kitchen table after school, where he'd lean over his textbooks and pretend not to care when I praised his efforts. Movie nights with microwaved popcorn and too many gummy worms. It wasn't perfect. There were still hard days. Days when he flinched at loud noises, when he withdrew into himself without warning. Days when he tested the edges of my patience, just to see if I would still be there when he pushed too hard. But every morning he came back. Every night, he said goodnight without being asked. Brick by brick, we were building something. Something real. About a month after the hearing, Jessie tried one last desperate play. I was coming home from the grocery store when I found her standing on my porch. She was soaked through from the rain, hair plastered to her face, makeup smeared. She looked nothing like the polished woman from the courtroom. She looked broken. For a second I just stared at her through the windshield, my keys frozen in my hand. I didn't want to get out. I didn't want another scene. But I also knew Eli was home, upstairs doing homework, and the last thing he needed was to see his mother collapse on our front step. I pulled into the driveway, took a deep breath and climbed out. Jessie rushed toward me before I could even shut the car door. Please, she gasped. Lena, please. Just let me talk to him. Just 5 minutes. I stood there, cold rain dripping down my jacket, heart pounding. You need to leave, I said, my voice flat. I know I messed up, she cried. I know. I was a mess, okay? I didn't know how to fix it. I still don't. But he's my son. Something inside me cracked just a little. Because once, a lifetime ago, this woman had been my best friend. Once, she had been the person I trusted with my ugliest truths, my darkest fears. And now she was a stranger. You should have thought about that before you left him alone, I said quietly. Jessie shook her head, crying harder. I didn't mean to, I thought he'd be okay. You thought wrong, I said. She reached for me then, desperate. Please, she whispered. Don't take him away from me. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time I saw the truth clearly. She didn't want Eli. She wanted to not be the villain in her own story. I stepped back, pulled my phone from my pocket. If you don't leave, I'm calling the police, I said. Jessie stared at me, stunned. Then finally she dropped her hands, turned away. She stumbled down the steps into the rain without another word. I stood there watching her go, heart hammering, until she disappeared around the corner. When I finally went inside, Eli was sitting at the top of the stairs, knees pulled to his chest. He looked at me with wide, frightened eyes. She's gone, I said gently. He nodded. Then, after a long moment, she always leaves. It wasn't bitter. It wasn't angry. It was just a fact. I climbed the stairs, sat beside him on the landing, and pulled him into my arms. I'm not going anywhere, I said into his hair. He didn't answer. But after a moment he hugged me back, tight, fierce, like he was anchoring himself to me. And for the first time in a long, long time I believed it too. Spring came fast that year. One afternoon, while Eli was at soccer practice and the house was finally quiet, I found a letter in the mailbox. No return address. Just my name, written in the same crooked handwriting I hadn't seen in months. Jesse. For a second I thought about throwing it out without reading. But something stopped me. I sat on the porch steps, the wood still warm from the afternoon sun, and opened it. It wasn't long. Just a single sheet of notebook paper, half crumpled. Lena. I'm leaving town. Maybe for good. I know you hate me. Maybe you should. I don't know how to fix what I broke. I don't even know who I am anymore. But Eli deserves better. You're better. You always were. Tell him I'm sorry. Jesse. No dramatics. No promises. Just gone. I folded the letter carefully and tucked it into the back of my kitchen drawer, next to all the important papers, the guardianship order, the school records, the drawings Eli made when he was little. I didn't tell Eli about it. Not right away. Some goodbyes are better left silent. Life didn't magically become easy after that. There were court reviews, therapy sessions, moments when Eli would come home angry for no reason and slam his bedroom door so hard it rattled the walls. But little by little, he softened, started laughing more, sleeping better, trusting the world piece by piece. He turned 14 that summer. We celebrated with takeout pizza, a cheap ice cream cake, and a few of his new friends from school. Nothing fancy. But when he blew out the candles, I saw it. The thing I'd been hoping for but afraid to believe. Happiness. Real unforced his. 3 months later, the court made it permanent. Full custody awarded. No more reviews. No more temporary labels. Just me and Eli, a real family, messy and imperfect in ours. When we left the courthouse that day, Eli tugged at my sleeve in the parking lot. Hey, he said, squinting up at me. Is it okay if I call you Mom now? I froze, keys jangling in my hand. He looked embarrassed immediately. I mean, only if you want. You don't have to. For a second my throat closed up. Then I crouched down, looked him in the eyes, and said the only thing that mattered. I'd be honored. He grinned. This big blinding grin that made him look like a little kid again for just a moment, and launched himself at me. In the middle of the courthouse parking lot, with people coming and going and traffic buzzing past, I hugged my son for the first time. My son. Not by blood, but by choice. By love.